Hi, my name is Bruce Bolger, and I'm founder of the Enterprise Engagement Alliance, and we're an organization dedicated to applying the principles of total quality management to people to enhance shareholder value. And as part of that, we have a whole bunch of free information that we provide on all aspects of stakeholder management, because it's all about harmonizing and aligning the interests of all of your stakeholders towards your purpose, goals, and objectives. And that requires a bunch of tools: communication, learning, leadership, culture, human capital management, metrics. And it also includes, as I said, communications. And one of the most powerful forms of communications is live events. So with Jaki Baskow, who is a legend in Las Vegas in terms of talent selection for top events of all kinds, we've created a meaningful meetings show that focuses on how you can make your meetings more meaningful, not only in terms of format, but in sharing wisdom in a way that you can't by just a simple webinar. And Jackie's helping us do this by bringing together experts and leaders in all areas of business and life, athletics, sports, movies, and business. And today we have somebody who kind of crosses all of those lines, or some of them, and that's Josh Linkner. And I don't have his caption there because to describe Josh, he's really such an extraordinary individual in terms of being a jazz guitarist, best-selling author, founding 5 companies, and well, we'll even get into what else. But the real point of these shows is to focus on the lessons learned. You can go on, read about Josh Linkner very quickly, Google him, tons of information on him. But what we're here to talk about with Jaki is, what has Josh learned from all of this that CEOs and business leaders can benefit from, and that anybody in an audience at a corporate event can benefit from. So really what you're going to get out of listening to this is a very personal conversation with Josh, as if you were at the Christmas or Hanukkah table, and maybe you had sat aside and you were drinking your glass of wine and you were just talking with Josh. That's kind of what we're going to try to do, but no wine, I'm afraid, or or after dinner drink. So we always like to thank the companies that we do business with to help them support companies like yours improve their engagement across the enterprise. And always we want to remind people we're the how-to organization. We give away a lot of information. You never have to join or have to pay to learn how to apply the principles of total quality management to your organization. And with that, I'm going to stop the share, and hopefully I'm going to see Josh. Josh and Jaki, nice to see both of you.
Good morning.
And
Thanks,
by the way,
Bruce.
Josh is located in his hometown of Detroit. He could live anywhere, and he's in Detroit. And Jaki, she's in beautiful Las Vegas. So, Josh, reading up about you, you describe yourself as a young man as kind of an oddball. Maybe that isn't the word you use, but a little bit of a misfit. Well, you don't look like one, and your background doesn't indicate that. So please explain that quickly.
Yeah, sure. As I grew up in Detroit, I always felt like, again, a bit of a misfit. If there was 20 kids in the room, I thought there was 19 of them and one of me. By the way, not in a good way. Like I felt a bit ashamed, or I just didn't feel like I fit in. And it wasn't, look at me, I'm better. It was probably the opposite. But what I learned over the years is that I think we're all kind of misfits. I'm yet to meet a full-on fit in. And I think that those differences is actually what brings the beauty of life to the surface, and allows us to step into our power and do our best work and create our biggest impact. So these days, and over the last 30 some years in business and music, I try to kind of lean into my inner misfit.
Okay, lesson number one, Jaki, right? I mean, if you're a misfit, if
Yes.
you feel it, don't be ashamed. Probably all of us are. Some of us are better at pretending it than others, right? But leaning into, in fact, we've heard this so many times, Josh, the great joy of this show is meeting people like you. And that's something we're hearing very frequently. Don't run away from who you are, lean into it. Well, when did when you got out, you started playing jazz really young, right? You started playing the guitar, what, 11 or something like that?
Yeah, I started playing piano at 8 and then guitar shortly thereafter. And I just fell in love with the instrument. And then quickly I fell in love with jazz. And jazz, I know not everyone loves listening to it. It's a bit of an acquired taste, but to me, it's this beautiful form of music because you're simultaneously composing and performing. And so it's almost a little dangerous. It's not just playing what Mozart intended 300 years ago. It's you make it up as you go. You're a participant in the process, and it requires collaboration, improvising, responding to changing conditions, recovering from mistakes and setbacks. And so I just love the art form. And actually, it turned out to be a wonderful teacher for the world of entrepreneurship and business.
A friend of mine who is a very successful, well, amateur musician, once told me that I was actually playing with him in a concert in college. And he said to me, Bruce, if you make a mistake, just repeat it. He said that's one of the things you learn, that if you repeat the mistake, people don't know it was a mistake. I'm sure you know many tricks like that. But anyway, so when you graduated from school, from high school or college, where at that point did you see yourself in life? Where did you see yourself going at that point?
I mean, I was very passionate about music. I actually graduated high school early because I played in the Wayne State University College jazz band when I was in high school. It was right in downtown Detroit. And I was off to the Berklee College of Music in Boston. And I was committed to being a lifetime musician. And what I learned is that, and I played professionally for many years. I played over 1,000 concerts around the world. But and while it was wonderful putting myself to music, it didn't seem to me the best, sort of economic landscape. Looking forward, wanting to have a family, and also the opportunity to create impact. And so I still play jazz. I know this sounds like a rehearsed line, but it's what I feel in my soul. I just use different instruments. And so when I start a company, it's playing jazz. When I invest in a company, it's playing jazz. When I write or give a keynote, it's playing jazz. And so to me, it's taking different elements and assembling them in fresh ways and helping to connect and tell stories and use patterns to bring ideas to life. And it's all about playing jazz for me, whether it's playing on a guitar or working in a business.
Well, what's interesting about it is that jazz is, and I'm not by any means a music expert, but growing up in New York, if you don't know something about jazz, you're, but it's really, if you think about it, isn't it almost like an organized chaos? There is a system, right? There's a basic system, and you use that, and tell me if I'm wrong, but because I think they're analogies to life. You use that system to be able to jump off of it and to go to the next level. But without that system, it might be chaos. Is that a bad analogy?
Well, it's actually a very good analogy. I think of jazz like a conversation. In theory, the three of us today are playing jazz. We're not reading from a script. We're listening to each other. You made a comment, I'll respond. Jackie will jump in. And if we did the same conversation every day for a week, every time would be different because we're bringing feelings, emotions, ideas together. That's what jazz is, playing with instruments. And at the same time, that's what jazz is when we're co-creating. In this case, a conversation, or if you're co-creating in a business environment.
And it also aligns you in jazz. And Jackie, I'm going to ask you a question in a second. Is that you're focusing on the same purpose, goals, and objectives and values, right? If in a jazz, you better be agreeing on the type of sound you're going to create, right? If one of you wants to go Gershwin and somebody else wants to go in a completely different direction, you're going to have a problem, right? So there has to be the fundamental purpose. Goals and objectives, it seems to me. And again, I'm only looking to this because they're analogies in life that you brought up. Jackie, why did you recommend Josh for this show about meaningful meetings and lessons learned?
Well, what I love about Josh is he talks about there are no problems. Every problems can be solved. And he's creative and inventive. And he talks about problems within corporations and with the employees about everything can be taken care of and everything can be solved. There's no such thing as a real crisis.
Well,
He's a New York best-selling author.
yeah, his his
New York
accomplishments are
Times.
lengthy. And yeah, I can gather that's exactly looking at his background. What people need today is how to, because every day is life's problems. Every single day, we're setting up the Christmas tree today. Okay, I'm trying to work. Their problems, finding the stockings. I mean, okay, it never ends. So, but let me get back to you. So okay, you left school, you were going to be a jazz musician, but you decided, hey, I got to make money. What happened? Where did that purpose change? How?
Yeah, I mean, there was an economic driver, certainly. I wanted to ultimately have a family and such, but there was also the idea of creating impact. As you know, jazz isn't the most popular art form, but if I could create more impact in a business setting than in a jazz club, I thought that was also an opportunity to step in and help others. And back to Jackie's point, I've really developed this philosophy. It started in jazz, which I just call find a way. Very simple phrase. People say it all the time, find a way. But to me, it's exactly what leaders do. If all you had to do is follow a checklist, AI can do that. And to me, anything that can be automated will be. What's left for humans is to navigate ambiguity and to figure things out even when it's not clear, to use nuance and humanity and empathy to drive real outcomes. And that's what we do in business, certainly what we do in jazz. What I love about the phrase, and again, it's really become more of a mantra to me, it's not find the way, meaning that there's only one way, it's find a way, meaning that any of us can add our own creative dose and find a distinct path. And it's about using, as Jaki pointed out, sort of real-time creativity. And this is in the form of, you might call it creative problem solving or ingenuity or resourcefulness or inventive thinking. So it's not only about inventing some new piece of technology or some marketing slogan, it's about navigating everyday challenges. And that's what life is. It throws challenges at you and you get a prompt, and how do you respond? Get a different prompt, how do you respond? And I help people develop a systematic approach to driving better outcomes by embracing creativity, by building creative confidence, and ultimately having the resolve necessary to drive the outcomes that we crave.
Doesn't it also, though, require a little bit of existentialism in the sense that a lot of bad things happen, a lot of aggravating things happen, and the timing is often bad when bad things happen, right? And things come in threes. So isn't there a little bit of to get through the tough things in life, a little bit of, you can't, uh, what do they say? You can't cry over things you can't change. What have you learned about that?
Yeah, that's a great point. And certainly I don't mean that everything's Pollyanna and, hugging and, I like to hug, but, there's real challenges in life for sure. And in fact, now more than ever, there's a rate of change like none other in history. We have a whole stack of things from inflation to geopolitical issues to division and. And so it's requiring us to show up in a different way and lead in a different way. And so I think these principles can be applied to growth opportunities, as well as how do you respond to something that's difficult. And of course, that involves the obvious, cultivating grit and tenacity and resilience. But I think it's more than that. It's not just fighting your way through something. It's having the hustle, but it's more about, can you use creativity as the main way to bounce back rather than just throwing muscle or grit at it? Because that's a much more sustainable approach and generally leads to better outcomes.
Well, and I also think it takes a little bit and you have to be very careful with being compartmentalizing. I kind of try to call it soft, compartmentalization, because you can't be an ostrich with your head in the sand either, right? But because look at the guys and ladies who fought in war, and you ask anyone, and they rarely will talk about it, as you know. And if you have, then you won't. But the ones when they've opened up a little bit, they'll tell you, how do you get through it? And it's compartmentalization. They put it into a box, into a vault. In fact, I think the Marines even have a slang term for it. But it's how, all bad things happen to all of us. So let me ask you this. You've built, we haven't gotten to that question yet. Okay, how did you get into being a venture capitalist and writing 5 books? Or whatever, starting 5 companies, writing a book, and then we're gonna have time. I want to hear about your venture capital company. We go and what you've learned from that. But answer my question, please, about how did you get into this pivot from jazz to business success?
Yeah, so I'm playing jazz. I didn't know anything about business. And at age 20, I started a tech company. I didn't know what I was doing, but like jazz, you find a way, you figure it out. And I managed to cobble this idea together. I would build computer components in my college apartment and sell them on campus as an assembled system, kind of like what Michael Dell did on a much, much smaller scale. And I made a ton of mistakes. Like, it wasn't perfect. I screwed everything up that could be screwed up multiple times, but eventually kind of figured it out and navigated and ended up selling that business. And then
what did the product do? What did the product do?
I just bought mail order individual components for computers and sold them as a completed system. And
so you would build a PC for somebody to their specs.
Yeah, and this was in 1990, so you couldn't just go to Best Buy and get a computer at a discount.
I had a buddy like you who made money for many years. Go ahead.
Yeah, what I learned is I just like the act of creating things, just like I do in music. And so I kind of got the bug, and I started using business as my new instrument. So playing jazz, using business as my new instrument. And I just kept looking for new ways to do things. In 1995, I started an internet company. No one knew what the internet was at the time, and every piece of data would tell you there's no market for it. But I started building websites and hosting e-commerce sites, and I followed the idea of that something's coming, and maybe I could lean into what's new, what's next, and that's been really my philosophy ever since. I built one company to a fairly large scale, offices throughout the world, and most of the Fortune 500 companies as customers. And I did this in this sort of non-traditional way. One theme I'll just share, and then I'll answer your question about venture capital is, I have a phrase, which I really like. It's actually a technique. I call it the judo flip. The judo flip, which is if I see somebody else doing something or most people doing certain things a certain way, I want to do it the opposite way. I always say the first question is, what's the judo flip? So in 1999, when everyone was focused on internet advertising, I said, what's the judo flip? Internet promotions. Instead of starting the world's 700th internet advertising company, I started the world's first internet promotion company. And so judo flipping is a philosophy that I use every day on the little stuff and the big stuff alike, which is like saying, instead of just accepting tradition and conventional wisdom as gospel, I always look at things and say, okay, that's what everyone else is doing. What can I do to judo flip it? And it really gets back to our conversation where we started being a proud misfit. I like taking the misfit approach, which is often the judo flip approach.
And remember, folks, lean into that. Lean into that as we're seeing. So this is diverging a little bit from our script here, but what's a judo flip right now to you? Everyone's into AI. Everyone's into AI. What to you? And you don't have to give away any secrets, of course. But what's a judo flip right now?
So I'll give you two real quick ones. I run a venture capital fund where we're investing in the next generation of groundbreaking technology. The fund is called Mudita Venture Partners, Mudita. The name itself is actually a judo flip. The name is a Sanskrit term, which means taking joy in other people's success. So when I see Jaki and the remarkable impact she's had in Las Vegas and the entertainment community and what she's done for talent, I'm not jealous or angry. I'm so happy for her success. It fills me with mudita. That's what mudita is. The reason we chose that word is that very often venture capital is ruthless and cutthroat. What's the judo flip of that? Mudita. The other judo flip that we're doing right now is that many venture funds are focused on deep tech. Deep tech is like the buzzword. Oh, it's a deep tech fund. What's your deep tech strategy? So what's the judo flip of that? Deep human. And so our fund, instead of being focused on deep tech, is focused on deep human. How do we elevate the humans behind the technology? How do we help leaders become the best version of themselves so that they can build the best effective companies? And so I'm always looking for a judo flip in just about everything I do, including my family, by the way. I'm always judo flipping stuff.
Well, that can be dangerous, and I'm going to ask you to speak to that because you can really, like for instance, I'm an advocate of something our organization is stakeholder capitalism, and that's a judo flip on shareholder capitalism, right? You make money by creating value, right? You make money, and by not offloading your costs onto society. That's your only corporate social responsibility. You don't have to solve the climate, just don't offload costs. That's a judo flip. But guess what? I've been judo flipping that since 1989. Okay. Now, thankfully, I didn't put my kids through college on that. So don't you have to be relevant to judo flip? You have to time it right, don't you?
I wouldn't mind maybe respectfully challenge that. I mean, first of all, the people that change history from religion to politics to, technology and innovation, don't just say, I'm just going to settle for the way things are. By definition, any type of new progress is essentially based in some type of judo flip or another. And sometimes there's a gestation period, so not everybody follows along. I mean, Dr. Martin Luther King certainly was judo flipping racism, and it took years for it to catch up, and it's still catching up, unfortunately. But thank God he had the courage to judo flip it. So I think standing up for new beliefs and seeing things in a new way instead of an old way is generally good. Doesn't mean every minute's going to be blissful. Doesn't mean you won't have resistance. But I kind of like the idea, and I think that's actually what we're meant to do. Why we're even on this planet is not to just blindly follow the checklist, but it's to invent something new and to make the world a little bit better. So I'm a big fan of it. And the other thing I'll just say quickly is I don't just judo flip for the sake of it. I mentally judo flip. So I say like, okay, here's a way we did it in the past. What's the judo flip? That judo flip might be a terrible idea. And I might say, actually, the way we're doing it right now still works. But at least I took the time to examine a new approach and then make a thoughtful, intentional decision to keep the original one rather than just blindly saluting the flag of the past and not even having the courage to question it.
So let me ask you, okay, you've accomplished all of this, right? 5 businesses, you've been best-selling books. What would you say are the key? If you're sitting on an airplane right now in first class and with a CEO of a major company, and she says to you, Josh, what have you learned from all of this? I don't need your stories. I've only got 5 or 10 minutes with you on this plane. What are you gonna what can you share with me in terms of success and leadership? Besides the great advice you've already given.
Yeah, thank you. It's a beautiful question, and it really speaks to philosophy. I actually just came up with a thing. I put my philosophies on t-shirts, so it's like a philosophy. Get it? Philosophy. But I've actually developed a handful of them, and I think the core message, of course, is that each of us can develop our own philosophies. But the ones that I've learned that have made a difference in my life, I'll share a couple. One of them, I try to live by this philosophy of give generously, don't keep score. And so I don't live in a world of scarcity where I got to get something to give something. I just like giving generously. And even if I've taken advantage of 10% of the time, okay, I'm happy to pay that tax so I can walk through the world not having to keep score. And by the way, what's ended up happening is I believe 10 times the returns on that, even though I'm not measuring everything. Another philosophy I have is to awaken the artist within. I believe, as well as the research clearly states, that all human beings are creative. We're born that way. We have this natural, beautiful capacity. That's one thing that separates us from machines. But most of us suppress that. And they have limited views like, oh, I don't paint. I'm not creative. I don't do interpretive dance. I'm not creative. The truth is we're all creative. And that's a core element of being a human being. So what I would encourage that CEO to do is say, why not help people awaken the artist within? Certainly applying good judgment, not going bonkers with that. But what if every one of your 100,000 people in your company was an artist? What does that mean? It means that you question things, that you try new stuff, that you care about your craft. I mean, those to me are beautiful kinds of things. And the last thing I'll just say is I like this notion of start before you're ready. Many times when we have an idea, some idea in the shower, some opportunity, we never end up pursuing it. We're always waiting. We're waiting for ideal conditions or a perfect game plan, and that happens in business all the time. And my loving advice to that CEO would be start before you're ready. There's something really magical about just thrusting yourself into motion, even if you can't see the finish line. And back to jazz, you kind of find your way as you go. You're navigating ambiguity, and you figure out the route in real time. And I think those are some lessons that would be pretty helpful for most organizations.
Well, it's interesting. Murdoch, the publisher, he used to say in the 80s and 90s, don't do any market research when you're going to launch a magazine. Launch it. Just launch it. You're going to find out for the same amount of money whether it's going to work, and it'll be much better data. Let me ask you that, what do you think about leadership today? In this country, I was very struck by the response to the killing of probably a very nice man who probably never meant to do anybody any harm. But what he unleashed, I'm stunned how anybody could in any way be happy about killing the guy as a solution. But what does this say? Is this just is there it seems to me that there's a fundamental anger about business today, big business, that is, am I wrong? And is there something we might be doing wrong that's causing that? Is it really the employee? Again, forget about a madman, but are Americans really wrong to be angry with the way employees and customers are often treated?
I would never tell anyone how they should feel because that's, they feel the way they feel. I'm certainly taking vigilante justice is wrong. I mean, that clearly we don't need to debate that. And I can see why, people sometimes feel wrong. They feel like they can't make their way in a system that's in their mind stacked against them. They can have all kinds of reasons for feeling the way they feel. But I do dislike the notion of vilifying in both directions. I think that people just tend to, especially recently in our society, I'm right, you're wrong. There's this division. Everybody else is the enemy. That's how Nazi Germany came to power, and we don't need that. I think that businesses are not evil inherently. I think we live in a capitalist society, which tends to drive progress, and we're living in a better, not every human being, but generally the best conditions since the beginning of the earth. And so to me, businesses aren't the enemy that should be beaten down. In fact, many people's retirement savings are tied up in businesses. And if you beat those businesses down, then the whole economy falls apart. It's bad for everybody. So I think it's more nuanced than that. But I think in general, let's stop vilifying each other, and let's look with empathy and curiosity and compassion, meeting people where they are, and look for ways that businesses help individuals and individuals help businesses. Our society would not be what it is without large and small businesses alike. And small and large businesses would not be successful without the very people that they serve. So I think it's got to be much more in living in harmony rather than living in conflict.
Well, by the way, the reason I have faith that business will get better is very simple. I believe in capitalism. I believe in the free market, and I think people want businesses to be better, but you can't elect the president of a company, right? I can't, the Americans don't vote for the CEO of United Healthcare. So I think people feel powerless, but they're not because they're voting with their feet. They're voting with who they invest in. They're voting with who they want to work for. They're voting who they buy from. And I look at all my kids, they're all buying from good companies. And they'll say, I'm not buying from that company. And, like Tesla, I think the guy, what was he getting into politics for? 50% of his customers now hate the company. What was he doing? But that's capitalism and he has a right to do it. But that to me, Josh, is why business will always get better. Because I bet you've said it. So why don't you end by saying, well, actually, we have a few more minutes. What kind of companies are you guys looking for? Are they aligned with values of some kind? Just give us a quick thing of what type of companies you're looking for.
Yeah, thank you for asking. So our North Star is to return $1 billion of capital to investors while, and this is important, returning $1 billion of good to the world. And every decision we make is in service of both of those things. It sounds kind of like stakeholder capitalism, if I might. But
yeah, it kind of sounds like it.
We only invest in companies that we think are going to be a net positive to the world if they're successful, or we won't invest. If someone came to me and said, hey, this is the best French fry technology, we can help obese kids become more obese, we'll make all this money. No, thanks, I'm going to pass someone else, that's not for us. So we invest in companies that we think are going to help the world while simultaneously driving good economic returns. And we look at both of those measures, and that's every decision we make, small or big, ties to that. And so, yeah, you might call it conscious capitalism, but we think that we can do well in doing good by building successful, healthy companies that create jobs and drive the economy, and that their products and services are a net positive to humanity.
And what types of companies and what stage?
We invest in early stage tech companies, mostly software. And we like to say pre-escape velocity. So they are usually post-revenue, but pre-growth spurt. I'll just give you a quick example. One company we just invested in, I learned that 500,000 people, their main language is American Sign Language. They use sign languages. And another 1.5 million interact with sign language every day, family members, caregivers, etc. Well, translation services are very expensive and few and far between. So if a governor is making a major announcement, there might be someone translating, but on a normal Zoom call, there's not, or in a restaurant, there's not. And what we did is we developed a technology that does bi-directional real-time ASL translation, which means that let's say we're on a Zoom call and there's an extra square, which looks like it looks like a person, but it's actually an avatar. I speak to it in English, it signs to you. You sign to it, it speaks to me. And so when you think about all the use cases in a business meeting, in a first responder situation, in a triage in a hospital, so that will be a very profitable company, and it's going to do good in the world. So that's the type of stuff that lights us up, where we can, again, serve both of those two important objectives.
That's terrific. You have a hard stop. Jaki, hold, if you have a question, I'm going to give you time, because one last piece of advice, and then I'm going to let Jaki close out with any thoughts she has. If she wishes. Josh, what do you tell a young kid today? Right, you were sitting with a CEO, now you're back in coach, and you're sitting next to a 19-year-old who's just going off to college or something, and he says, Josh, I'm trying to find my way. Anything you can tell me?
That's a great question. There's a saying that we've all heard many times, I'll see it when I believe it. No, I'll believe it when I see it. I'll believe it when I see it, which basically means you don't believe it. That's implying skepticism, and you only will believe it if there's evidence and proof in front of you. I would tell that young person today to judo flip that phrase. I'll see it when I believe it. In other words, that belief is the predecessor to any type of progress. And for a young person to go out and say, well, I'm going to play it safe, like that's a recipe for living small. If you have deep conviction and a belief, and then you put all your energy into finding a way to get there, that's exactly what I would tell a young person today. There are difficulties in the world, but there's profound opportunity. And I think it starts with a belief and conviction, and then you put the pieces in place that are required to find a way.
Beautiful. Jaki, any last reflections or anything you'd like to ask?
Well, what I love about Josh, not because he's on our podcast, but he leaves me with thoughts, and today he left me with two. Awaken the artist within you. And it doesn't have to be an entertainer. We all have special gifts. And I also love find your way as you go, because there's so many people that are lost out there. And it takes one step at a time, because I'm in business 48 years, and I'm still like an octopus, always reinventing ourselves, because there's so many new things and fabulous things to awaken our eyes for. So thank you, Josh.
No, thank you,
Truly a
Josh. I
pleasure.
was mindful of your hard stop. The show will be live next week with a feature article if you don't want to watch the show. Josh, thanks again. We got a lot of wisdom out of this that you'll quickly see.
Bruce and Jackie, thank you. It's an honor to be with you. Look forward to talking soon.
Can't wait to book you
Thanks.
again.
Thank you.